No, really, man, it's insane. They had Aang just flying around like he was Superman or something. Dang, that's a shame. I had high hopes for that show. Yeah, it's the same kind of crazy that is making people try to let 16-year-olds vote in elections. What's the problem with that? Dude, come on. Obviously 16-year-olds can't vote. They probably vote in Billie Eilish or something. I don't see the problem. They're citizens, they live here just like everyone else. Bro, are we doing this right now? Oh, you know it's on now. You ready to get schooled like a banana getting peeled for the first time? Wait, what? Doesn't matter. Let's do this. Here's how this works. We are going to debate this topic. Debate the heck out of it. Yes, we will debate it with gusto. Points are awarded by you, the viewer, based on who you think made the point better or was backed by more reputable sources, or said it in the most suave way, or whatever. Points are awarded in the comments. Make sure to mention why the point was awarded when you comment. Once the video gets to 1,000 comments or 100 likes, whichever comes first, we will tally up the points and announce the winner. Sound good? Sounds great. All right, let's do this. Go ahead and tell me how the literal children should run the country. Hey, they're not children. Well, maybe technically they are, but that's just a technicality. Let me show you a study. As you can see, this study has been done in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science, a very prestigious journal, by the way, and they found that 16-year-olds score comparably to adults on a lot of things like civic knowledge or political skill. The Annals? You're quoting something called the Annals at me? Okay. And I'm sure that same study surveyed a bunch of 16-year-olds who were absolutely not distracted by their phones the entire time. What the heck is your problem with the Annals? Well, the name, for starters. But you know what else scientists have studied? A little something called the prefrontal cortex. Let me show it to you. This is just a little part of the brain that handles things like weighing dilemmas, balancing trade-offs, making reasonable decisions. You know, the thing required for voting responsibly, still under major construction and development during the teenage years. That's not me making things up, Bob. That's neuroscience. Okay, but here's what other scientists say. There are two kinds of cognitive skills. There's hot cognition, which is things like impulsiveness or acting out of emotion. And then there's cold cognition, which is the deliberate, well-reasoned kind of thinking, the kind you use in a voting booth. And those cold cognition skills are solidly established by the age of 16. You know what though, Bob? Society has already indirectly made a decision on this. We don't let 16-year-olds join the military. We don't let them sit on a jury. They can't buy a gun. They can't smoke a cigarette. They literally cannot enter into a contract with another person that is legally binding. There has been a very deliberate line drawn here. Guess what though? Austria crossed that line in 2007, very deliberately, I might add, and it worked. Here, let me show you. A University of Vienna professor studied the elections after the voting age was lowered, and he found that the quality of younger voters' choices was similar to older voters. Quality? What does that mean, quality? I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably something like they were as well informed as the adult voters they were compared to, or something. Okay. Austria, though? Isn't that the country famous for the Sound of Music and strudel? Bob, this is America. We have a long, rich tradition of people making terrible decisions at all age, and we don't need to start recruiting for that earlier. That's not a counter-argument, Bob. Fine, how about this? Most 16-year-olds are living at home, under their parents' roof, eating their parents' food, and, let me pull up some studies for you. These people suggest that in many cases, young voters simply vote the way their parents vote. You're not adding new voices to democracy, you're just giving certain households extra ballots. That is a deeply cynical view of young people. That's a deeply realistic view of young people. I was a young person once, Bob. I was not making profound, independent political judgments at 16. Here, I was trying to convince a girl named Vanessa that this was me on this motorcycle. And did you? I did not. But my point still stands. 16-year-olds haven't paid rent, haven't navigated the healthcare system, they probably haven't had a boss. They don't have the lived experience that informs a vote, and that isn't something you can study your way into. So your argument is that suffering is a prerequisite for democracy? Not exactly, but it might be a good start. No, I'm saying experiences. And don't try to tell me that getting bullied in the cafeteria or worrying about a school shooting, as horrific as those things are, is the same kind of life experience that shapes a fully formed civic voice. That's not fair to the issue or to the children. Think of the children, Bob. Stop that. Dude, issues like gun violence and school safety are affecting 16-year-olds the most. Why should they have no say in policies that directly impact their lives? And don't try to turn this into a point about how we need to go out for ice cream more often. But Bob, I have to keep my personality sweet somehow. Fine, but you've made a genuinely good point. Did you just admit that I made a good point? Don't make it weird. I still think the brain science wins. The prefrontal cortex is not a technicality, it's the whole thing. And until it's done cooking, I think we need to stick a fork in it. Gotta have the whole enchilada for these things. I cannot believe that you're using food as a metaphor for human neurological development. It's called a gift, Bob. Not everyone has it. Not a gift I'd want for Christmas. What was that? I said voter turnout. How about them apples? Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Nothing I love more than statistics about how people choose not to do something. The United States has one of the lowest voter turnout rates among developed countries. Honestly, it's embarrassing. There's some research, let me show you. This research shows that a person who votes in one election has a 13% greater probability of voting in future elections. Voting is a habit, dude, and habits form early. So your solution to low voter turnout is more voters who don't turn out? That's not what I said. This research also shows that people who don't vote when they first become eligible are more likely to remain non-voters permanently. So why not start the habit early, when kids are still in school, still structured, still surrounded by adults who can help them register and find their polling place? It's so great that your vision of democracy is essentially, what if voting were a homework assignment? Bob, think about it. 18-year-olds are in transition. They've just left home, maybe they're just starting college, working a job or two, figuring out what a W-2 is, trying to convince girls named Vanessa of their non-existent motorcycles. They are uniquely bad at forming new civic habits. 16-year-olds are still in school. They have civics classes at 10:15 every day. The infrastructure is already there with open arms, ready and willing to support them. The infrastructure, Bob? Do you know what the infrastructure of civics education currently looks like? Because I do, and it is not pretty. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Let me show you. This chart comes from the NAEP, and if you were in the know, you know that this is the gold standard of measuring what American kids actually know. And in 2022, only 20% of 8th graders scored at or above proficient in civics. 20%, Bob, and that's down from the tests in the past. Okay, but I'm not done. 31% scored below basic. Here's basic. Here is below basic. Nearly a third of 8th graders could not define the word government, constitution, or rule of law. These aren't even trick questions. These are the words on the vocab list before the vocab list. Those are 8th graders. We're talking about 16-year-olds. How old are 8th graders again? Like 13 or 14? Okay, so those 8th graders from 2022, which is when that assessment was done, are now 16 and older, and the results from the 12th graders weren't exactly a triumph of American intellectual achievement either. How did those 8th graders score on their history test? Not great. Almost half couldn't correctly answer a multiple choice question about why people supported the 18th Amendment. Okay, what was the 18th Amendment again? Prohibition, Bob. Right. I knew that. You absolutely did not. The point is, poor civics scores are an argument for better civics education, not against lowering the voting age. Or, and stay with me here, they're an argument that the civics education we have now is not producing voters who are ready to vote. Here, this guy, David Davenport, is a researcher at the Hoover Institution, and he said if a 16-year-olds were allowed to vote at any broad scale, we'd be bringing the least politically informed, least experienced, and least mature decision makers directly into the electorate, and potentially affecting results. Hey there, sound elitist much, David? He sounds accurate, Bob. Accurate schmaccurate. Let's move on to one of my favorite parts of this discussion, trickle-up civics. Studies have shown, let me show you, when young people vote, it can mobilize the adults in their household, parents, guardians, that kind of thing, and younger voters can actually pull older non-voters into the process and get them to participate in elections. The first U.S. municipality to lower the voting age for local elections was in Maryland, and the turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds was double that of the local eligible voters. Double the turnout of a group famous for not showing up is still a very low bar there. Hey, and trickle-up civics, where the children are now educating the parents about democracy is, I appreciate the optimism, I do. But we are essentially proposing to shore up adult civic engagement by handing the torch to a generation that, by the numbers, cannot identify the constitutional amendment that banned alcohol. Maybe they just don't find prohibition interesting. Nobody finds prohibition interesting, Bob. But that is not the point. Look, it even says it right here. Ha ha, real mature, man. You're welcome. The point is, that structural learning environment you're praising, the one that's supposedly going to produce these engaged, informed young voters, is currently producing students who score below basic on the very subject you were saying will prepare them to vote. Okay, that's a fair point. Thank you. But I still think the habit formation argument is compelling. You can't build the habit if you never start. And I think you can't start a habit you don't have a foundation for. You wouldn't hand someone the keys to your car before driver's ed, but that is a terrible analogy, and you know it. I know nothing of the sort. I'm very proud of that analogy. Okay, Bob, let me ask you something. When the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 in the 1970s, do you know what the argument was? I do, actually. They said that if the 18-year-olds were old enough to be sent to Vietnam, they should be old enough to at least vote for the people sending them there. Exactly. The U.S. Senate literally cited student activism and protests as a reason for the change. The whole argument was, we must channel the energy of young people into the political system and give them real influence. That same logic applies today. Bob, Vietnam was a war. Students were being drafted. This is a somewhat higher stakes situation than, and I mean this respectfully, a TikTok campaign. Look, students today are dealing with school shootings and climate change. Those are existential threats to their future. Let me see if I can find this girl. This girl, Sophie Whitney, is a survivor of the Parkland High School shooting, and she said, if 16-year-olds are old enough to be affected by the laws and they can clearly identify the problem, then they should have the power to help change it. That is a genuinely moving point. I respect Sophie Whitney enormously. Thank you. So do I. And it is also not sufficient argument for restructuring the electorate. Being affected by a law and being equipped to evaluate the full complexities of the policy response to that law are two very different things. Maybe. But other teenage activists have made the same point, that teenagers deal with peer pressure, gun violence, drugs, and bullying every single day, yet they still manage to rise above it. That's not nothing, Bob. That's character. You're right, that is character. I completely agree. It's also not the same thing as understanding federal budgetary trade-offs or the geopolitical implications of energy policy. Okay, but here's the part you can't dismiss. At 16, a person's relationship with the law fundamentally changes. They can drive, they can work, they can pay taxes in most cases, and in most states, they can be legally emancipated from their parents and live completely independently. If the law already treats them as capable of those responsibilities, why not this one? Taxation without representation? Are you going full founding fathers on me? I'm just saying there's a real inconsistency here. And I am saying the American people have looked at that inconsistency and made their choice. An overwhelming choice of 84% to be specific. What are you referencing? I am referencing a Hill Harris X poll. Let me show you. This poll shows that 84% of voters were opposed to lowering the voting age to 16. Every single group was against it. Bob, even adults under 35, the most sympathetic demographic, they only had 39% in favor. Wait, what is this graph saying? I don't get it. You know? Now that you mention it, I'm not actually sure. I was kind of trusting the article that went along with it to explain it, but now that I'm looking at this, I'm not sure this is a point in my favor. Fine. Even if you did understand these numbers you are citing without understanding, polls aren't policy arguments, Bob. Lots of popular opinions have been wrong throughout history. Oh, absolutely. But we're not talking about a narrow majority here. We're talking about somewhere between overwhelming consensus and did anyone actually want this? Also, there are a lot of people who would like to raise the voting age back to 21. That poll sounds suspect. You always think the poll sounds suspect when you don't like the numbers, Bob. Because sometimes the poll is suspect. Okay, here's one that's a little more clear. There was a proposed bill to lower the voting age to 16 in the District of Columbia, and there was a response of almost 77% that is firmly against it. The local NBC affiliate ran a similar poll, which had an even stronger negative response. In a city that votes overwhelmingly progressive, Bob, even the people most likely to be sympathetic said no. Okay, but you know the will of the majority has suppressed the rights of minorities throughout American history, and that is a documented fact. It is a documented fact, and duly noted, but there's a difference between civil rights and the question of at what specific age do we as a society draw the line for civic participation. Those are not the same category of question. The driving and taxes thing still bothers me, though. It should bother you. There's some real tension there, I will give you that. But this is complicated and slightly inconsistent is not the same as a therefore 16-year-old should vote. Life is full of lines that are slightly arbitrary, Bob. The speed limit isn't 55 because 56 is definitively too fast. That's the second terrible analogy you've made in this debate. I prefer to think of them as accessible metaphors for complex democratic theory. Hold up, pen and paper. I need to write that down so I can tell someone you said it. Please do. I've been trying to get that phrase into circulation for years. Well, I think I'm pretty much out of points. You? Yeah, that's it for me too, I think. Want to grab a beer? Yeah, sure. You buying?